Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for calling this hearing. Of course, it focuses on Appalachia. We know that opioids are a problem throughout the United States. It's interesting how drugs tend to find their place of their favorite places, and the link between opioids and heroin, and how that is playing out. But this is particularly bothersome because we find opioids here in Appalachia, where there's, to begin with, poor education, low income, often rural areas, the last place in these kind of epidemics, really heartbreaking. Here, opioids, of course, the difference between opioids and heroin is that nobody prescribes heroin. Initially, opioids are prescribed, and then they become a kind of rogue drug. What interested me was to note that the Chamber of Commerce in Pennsylvania has seen a link between employability and the skills gap and this opioid crisis. And I'm wondering, in light of a survey that has been cited to us, for example, that businesses find that over 20% of applicants or their potential new hires often fail a drug test. So I'm interested in, Mr. Dent, in what your legislature is doing, given what appears to be an effect on the economy itself and on getting people who might otherwise be employed a job.
There has been no legislation with regard to the issue of the business and industry with employers in terms of their right to issue, drug tests on individuals. But
I understand they're right, but they're having to do it because they suspect so many of those who are applying for jobs have been caught up in this crisis. And I wonder if the legislature has found any way to address this problem of employability with an ultimate effect on your economy in Pennsylvania.
Ma'am, no short-term answers, no quick fixes. I think it's been recognized, certainly from the public hearings that we've held across the Commonwealth, education prevention and education starting at the lowest levels, and we heard this from the Unite program, that has been seen as the long-term fix in this long-term crisis.
If people are better educated, are they not caught up in this opioid crisis and they can pass the drug tests, and it's basically poorer people that are involved? If it's a question of education, is the link between education and employability such that you can get a hold of these people once you try to get them off of the drug and deal with the education problem at the same time?
Yes, ma'am. Pennsylvania implements what's called a PACE study, Pennsylvania Youth Survey. It's done every year, and that measures attitudes, behaviors, influences of youth in grades 6 and 10th and 12th grades. We're seeing individuals coming from family members where family parents are approving marijuana use. They would rather them do that, or they would rather them drink in the home as opposed to going outside. So with this whole education, it's getting in early and changing attitudes and behaviors and mindsets. It's going to be a long-term solution.
Before my time runs out,
I'm sorry.
Appreciate that answer. I want to ask Mr. Novak a question, because I'm wondering why this problem has grounded itself in areas like Appalachia, whether or not the DEA had a role in stopping this kind of entrenchment at any time. And when did it become so entrenched, and why did it become so entrenched in an area like this?
First of all,
I want to know all I can to keep it from becoming entrenched in the big cities.
And what we're seeing now is it's becoming entrenched everywhere, or rather, it has become entrenched everywhere. It is a problem that we didn't recognize until it was far too late. Poorer areas or isolated areas, they found a market for these kinds of drugs because they seemed to be valid because a doctor's prescribing you, and if a doctor's prescribing it, it must be good for you. But it's also, that almost gave people a pass. Well, I'm not abusing, I'm just using what my doctor prescribed to me for my pain management. DEA, again, you need to look at the fact that there are divisions around the country, and the larger an area and the bigger the population and the more funding that that division has, the more proactive they could be. And unfortunately, some of the worst problems I saw at DEA were cases coming out of areas that nobody cared until it was too late. I know Florida, for instance, got hit devastatingly with all of this, but it was always in the smaller towns, a little further away. It wasn't Miami, it was Oviedo. And that's where this all took root. It took root with a populace that, could get these drugs for much cheaper at the time, and then felt validated in using them. And again, the addiction rate it's staggering how addictive these things are. And 2 months of being on an opioid, suddenly you're addicted. And it just escalates and escalates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman now